I'm Kiran, and a very warm welcome to today's event, Remapping Multilateral Trade Routes for Trump's Tariffs. Thank you to our speakers for joining us today, and to our moderators for leading this important discussion. We're also grateful to all of you for taking the time to be here on a Friday evening. Your presence means a lot to us. This discussion is a part of the speaker series hosted by the Indian Foreign Policy Project in collaboration with Project Statecraft. The Indian Foreign Policy Project is a student-led initiative making foreign policy accessible to youth across South Asia and beyond. Through critical dialogue with diplomats, ministers, and experts, we connect young voices to India's global affairs. Our collaborator, Project Statecraft, is an independent and non-partisan youth-led policy think tank and an education-based social enterprise. They propagate youth-to-youth learning through an interactive and simulation-based pedagogy for policy education and 21st century skills, and provide young policy researchers and leaders with a platform to publish quality research. They're committed to bridging the gap between young people and decision makers in social impact, public policy, and community development through inclusive research, education, and advocacy. Let me now introduce our incredible speakers for the evening. Mr. Katherine B. Hadda is a senior visiting fellow at the Chair for India and Emerging Asian Economies at the Center of Strategic and International Studies, where she leads India-related health programs. Her work focuses on uniting the efforts of government officials, implementers, and donors to improve public health outcomes in Indian states. Ms. Hadda is a frequent commentator on US-India policy issues and international media. A prior senior diplomat, she was the US Consul General in Hyderabad, making her the most senior US official in the region, covering three Indian states with a combined population of 130 million. Her other diplomatic postings include Italy, Afghanistan, New Zealand, Taiwan, the UK, and China. Next up is Mr. James Kynge, who is a writer on Chinese technology, economy, and geopolitics. His forthcoming audiobook, Global Tech Wars, China's Race to Dominate, is to be published this month. Mr. Kynge spent 28 years at the Financial Times reporting on China, mostly as the Global China editor. From 1998 to 2008, he was based in Beijing, reporting on China's rise as an economic and geopolitical force. His prize-winning book, China Shakes the World, has been translated into 19 languages. Next up is Ambassador Rahul Chhabra, who is a former Secretary of Economic Relations at the Ministry of External Affairs, a post he held till his retirement, where among several tasks, he spearheaded India's $40 billion development partnership program and guided EXIM Bank's policies as a board member. While earlier serving in New Delhi, Ambassador Chhabra worked to promote foreign investment flows into India and was part of India's delegation to the World Economic Forum at Davos. Later, he served as Director of External Publicity and Director of the Foreign Secretary's Office. Ambassador Chhabra was previously the High Commissioner to Kenya, Ambassador to Somalia, and Permanent Representative to the United Nations Environment Program and United Nations Human Settlement Program, and Ambassador to Hungary and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Last but definitely not the least, our moderator for today's discussion, Mr. K.A. Badarinath, who is a trained journalist with 40 years of experience across media platforms and has worked with major media brands like the Economic Times, Hindustan Times, and Financial Express. Specializing in economic policy issues like taxation, trade, budgeting, and development economics, Mr. Badarinath was the editor-in-chief at the Financial Chronicle, a joint venture between Deccan Chronicle and the New York Times. Mr. Badarinath currently heads the Center for Integrated and Holistic Studies, a non-partisan think tank based in New Delhi, and is the principal advisor for the Ministry of Education and Broadcasting, Government of India. He is also a member of the board of several institutes and universities. We are truly honored to bring together this stellar panel of speakers, each of whom brings decades of experience and deep insights into the evolving dynamics of global trade, diplomacy, and policy making. As we unpack the implications of President Trump's tariff-era policies, we hope to explore not just how the trade map is being redrawn, but also who gets to hold the pen. What are the lessons for India and other emerging economies? How do we navigate an increasingly fragmented global economic order while safeguarding our national interests and global partnerships? Without further ado, I'll now hand over the floor to our moderator, who will guide us through this critical discussion. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon. Welcome to all. Am I audible, please?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Right. I thank the organizers, Indian Foreign Policy Project people, and the project Statecraft people for having put this together, a brilliant panel, as well as well, the entire ecosystem. Actually, till last week, if you all recall, the major subject for discussion in these parts of the world has been the President Trump's decision on tariffs and the aftermath. Though it's a developing story, if James would agree with me, it's a developing story. And still, we have not gone to the final. And in the journalistic parlance, more is expected and much more to be reported. And meanwhile, we are trying to analyze as to what exactly it means for the world, how it is going to be seen or perceived, and what is its relevance to China, or is it going to be there going to be a new world order and that kind of things. So, what I would suggest, please kindly, if there is anything that you people would like to suggest, you can stop me and make suggestions. What we'll do is I'll only take 2 minutes to introduce the subject. After that, all the panel members can make their introductory remarks. Then maybe a few issues we can discuss for the second round. And the last 20 minutes we can leave it for, or 30 minutes we can leave more for interaction. If there are questions and that kind of stuff, that can be the way to go about it. If it is okay with all of you, then we would go ahead with the kind of an interaction. Is that all right, Rahul
Yeah.
ji,
Yeah, please.
Katherine, and
Sounds good.
James?
Yeah,
Is it okay?
please.
Okay.
Yep.
Right. Right. Thank you. Thank you all. In the run up to the US elections, uh, uh, the major policy push or the orientation that the Republican Party under President Trump had, articulated was to go for the MAGA, or Make America Great Again kind of a slogan was the biggest clinching point for him to get back to power in last few months. And this has, in a way, made him this as the tariffs or rebalancing trade and investments, or his understanding that President Trump's understanding that the entire world is pleasing America, and there's possibility that yes, there's something needs to be done on that. And this line of thinking is distinctly different, as I understand, from what President Joe Biden and his, team of administrators had worked upon. So we have a situation now. Beginning last few weeks, a lot of tariff orders, then geopolitical related issues have been dealt with, and most of them are project in the making. That kind of a situation. And in this context, tariff is one big issue which has been, it has come on to us. The markets have reacted, equities, the debt market, the currency market, the bullion market, the commodities. Globally, investors have faced the situation, and they continue to face. And apart from that, what does it mean? What does this recalibration of tariffs mean? Or say reciprocal tariffs mean for America, maybe for China, for the European Union, and for the rest of the world, if they want to bracket it that way. since we are discussing it from these parts of the world, is there anything particular that will happen to India? Is one issue perhaps we can look at as a idea. So also there have been analysis that look, the world order is going to change. It will have implications for geopolitics. There will be new set of leaders, and combinations will be different politically and all that. And a raft of orders have come in on tariffs, beginning with 10% to maybe 134%. So, and for different countries, and different regions, the impact seems to be different. In this backdrop, I would only make two sentences, and after that, I leave the floor to the other panelists to make their statement. From there, we take on the discussion. Just reading the other day that Apple had to transship more than 600 tons of mobile phones from India to escape the tariff related issues, tariff related impact from India, so that it is stocking up as many mobile phones as possible in USA to be sold in that market. This was one big story which hit the headline all over India and South Asia. Second big headline that came in was that, okay, there were measures and countermeasures. So the Boeing aeroplane, which was to be delivered to one of the Chinese airlines, had to go there, which was to be delivered, and it has been returned to US because the Chinese administration's decision not to take any more deliveries. And third big story.
I seem to have got frozen out of Mr. Badarinath's.
Yeah, he's frozen. I don't know
He
that
is frozen.
anyone else is.
Okay,
Yeah,
so you're okay. So you're okay. Okay.
I am okay.
Yes,
Okay,
it's the
this is
same
good.
issue centrally as well. And as a host, I can see Mr. Badrinath is frozen.
Okay.
That I have seen, the alphabet.
I think there was a technical glitch because of which.
Yes. Okay. I'm back here. Am I audible, please?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, sir, we
Yeah.
can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So the alphabet is trying to relocate some of its facilities to India from Vietnam in order to take advantage of the lower tariffs with India. Now these are smaller stories which are coming in. But what is the big picture? And how does it pan out for the world?
He's frozen again. I mean,
What does it mean for globalization is a question. And second big part that we can look at is, since most of the tariffs have been on hold or in a pause mode for for the 90-day window that has been created. If that is the case, then the entire discussion comes in between China and United States. Is the tariff war going to be just limited to the two big easts? Or alternatively, what exactly is going to happen in the next few months is something perhaps we want to discuss. Will it have geopolitical impact as well? Is there going to be just a trade war, or is going to be some other kind of a war? Will it spill over? Is something which we need to think about. So I would want all of you to put your thoughts together and perhaps make initial statement. And after that, maybe for second round of discussion, and then we'll open the floor for questions from the participants. Is that okay? Who'd like to start? Katherine, you want to start?
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here with you and with these really esteemed panelists. And thank you to Kieran for that excellent introduction. And really, thanks to every young person on the line who's interested in foreign affairs. It's very important and not always the case. So perhaps because I'm the only American on the screen that I can tell, I can just offer a little bit of background of how we got here to start us off, if that would be helpful. Which is, you mentioned that President Trump during his campaign, promised to issue these tariffs. I think there was a general sense among at least people with more skin in the game, big businesses, financial people, that this was a negotiating tactic on the part of the president. One that he had used during the first administration, and that when he did levy tariffs in the first administration, for example, on India, it was limited to certain sectors, limited to certain products. So I think the first shock was that he actually followed through. The second shock was he's done it to not only China or people with, you could argue with India with respect has very high tariffs, but he started actually with our major trading partners, Canada and Mexico, who had a treaty that we actually, that he negotiated, renegotiated. So I think that was the second shock. And the third shock was really the speed, because he's done all these things by executive orders. And I don't think in our system, the Congress is supposed to be in charge of tariffs. This is declared an emergency. It's a little unclear what the emergency was. So I think all those are sort of the proximate causes of where we are. And markets are reacting accordingly with because of the uncertainty surrounding everything, the back and forth, who will be next, what will happen. So that's a bit of a background. I did want to note that it really, as behind a lot of radical maneuvers, there is some truth, to what the president was saying, that some countries really have, notably China, but not only China, have taken advantage of the global trading system. That the United States does have more open markets, had more open markets than a lot of countries had. There are a number of non-tariff barriers that continue to impede trade. I'm not going to say the United States is innocent of that, but we're relatively open. So there was some truth behind it, and also the impact. If you look at the core MAGA supporter, they don't own stocks. A lot of them live in communities that have been emptied out of manufacturing over the decades, by decades of a promise of free trade and open trade. We can argue, I'm sure James, for example, has a lot of economic explanations, as I've heard, about, whether that was going to happen anyway with globalization. And in a way, trade has rescued a lot of small towns. But if you were in one of those small towns and, saw high levels of fentanyl addiction, high levels of illegal immigration, you don't really want to listen to economists. You want to listen to someone who is promising to fix it for you. So anyway, as that backdrop, I would say that's how we got here. It didn't come from nowhere, although it came faster and in a way that I think surprised a lot of people.
Right. Okay. All right. James, you want to pitch in with your thoughts?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here speaking to the students. It's a real privilege, and you'll notice that a painting of umbrellas. This is because I'm speaking from the UK, and you never know when you'll need an umbrella in the UK. But I also think that the umbrellas may be a fitting symbol for where we are in the world today. It seems to me that it is raining hard on Pax Americana. It is raining hard on the global economic order that was created by America after the Second World War, and which, from my perspective at least, we have all benefited from explosion of wealth, such as we have seen since the Second World War. Of course, this wealth has been unevenly distributed. Some countries have done extremely well, other countries have done less well, but on an aggregate basis, the developing world and the developed world have all benefited hugely. And so where we are right now, particularly with the trade war and the geopolitical tensions between the US and China, is on a precipice. We're on a precipice looking at a potential, and I want to emphasize the word potential, completely different order, probably preceded by chaos. So I really do think that this discussion is important at this time. I would agree with a lot of what Katherine said about the causes of the trade war between the US and China. But I would add one thing. I think that overwhelmingly, what is causing the panic that we see in Washington is that people in the US are beginning to realize that China has already won the tech war with the United States. This is the topic of my new audiobook that came out this week. I don't have time on this panel to give all the examples in all of the industries of where China is now ahead of the US in technology, but it really is across the board, aside from a few key areas like semiconductors. And the last thing I'd say is that China's technological emergence is not a flash in the pan. It is rooted in deep structural momentum in China. I'll just mention a couple of those. The speed and the capacity of China's data at the moment is far ahead of anything that we have in the West. And the cost and the capacity of China's power supply is also far ahead of anything that we have in the West. In other words, China is the cheapest, has the technology to supply power at the cheapest rate. I'm mainly talking about solar, but increasingly also small nuclear reactors. And this is something that I don't know about the situation in India, but certainly here in Europe, we really struggle with. In the UK, we have enormously high costs of power. And if the world is going to be increasingly animated by artificial intelligence, then data centers become crucial technology because it's in data centers that you train the large language models. And data centers run on power. If you have incredibly high power tariffs, as we have over here in the UK and in several other European countries, you are at a structural disadvantage in competing in the new era. So I'd leave it at that, but I really want to emphasize the tech war as a cause for the current geostrategic and trade friction between the US and China.
Good. Thank you, James, for your opening remarks. And you have given a different perspective taken from tariffs to technology wars that you're talking about. And it was a lot of definitely a big discussion in these parts of the world. Ambassador Chhabra, you would like to make your remarks?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Badarinath, and thank you, Katherine and James, for those very concise and interesting opening remarks. So it leaves me with, in a great frame. You put the framework in place. So I really don't have much to add, except that, of course, just continuing a little bit on first starting with Katherine's points that she mentioned about how the small towns have hollowed out and all that, while agreeing to everything to what she said. Obviously, the point I wanted to add on that was I don't know whether President Trump's manner of trying to solve the issue is the right way to go about it. So that's just a debating point, which I'm sure even Katherine has.
No debate, actually.
There's no debate on that. Okay. So that was the one point I wanted to make, that there could have been many other ways of doing it, or doing it more gently or whatever, that what I mean. But going back also to the big picture, as James said, we are on the precipice. I mean, I wonder whether it's really we are on the precipice, or we've already started slipping down because of, firstly, I mean, the collapse of the WTO. I mean, it's pretty clear that, it's over, that the period of the WTO, the rules-based order is over. So it's all now going to be deals, and no longer multilateral deals. It's going to be bilateral deals. And I'm not so sure whether these deals can be set in place in 90 days. Or, I mean, these took years to work out. I mean, we all know, there are 8,000 line items in the International Trade Classification. So if you're going to start negotiating, line item by line item, which you need to, if you say, everything is up for negotiation and we are going to do a deal, then a deal means, you pick up one item, I pick up one item, and there are 8,000 of these, and you're going to do bilaterally with each country. I mean, this is not going to get solved. So, and until then, the uncertainty that has created, of course, we are all aware, as those now that, Apple has shipped its many tons and many Boeing jumbo jets of planes, what's going to happen to the rest of the production lines are sort of slowing down, investments are slowing down, consumers are not purchasing stuff. I mean, we all know that of cases where, people are still waiting to see how it's going to resolve itself. So there's a general, the latest IMF forecast for global economic growth is down, of course, not only in the US, not of course for the globe, and for India also. So there is this thing. That's one big picture. The second one is, of course, the sort of retaliatory measures on rare earths, on food, on tech, what has already started getting into place, the big picture of retaliation. So that's it doesn't go away. And China has done it very sort of subtly, without sort of imposing any tariffs and all. They've just said, you need these sort of new procedures, which James is aware of, and I think Katherine also must be monitoring. So they've done that on rare earths, and sort of the third point I wanted to make was the growth of sort of alternative. People are really beginning to think, I mean, EU, ASEAN, EU with Latin America, India doing more. So sort of different trading blocks are going to be coming out. And the faith that the world has, the US may still remain a big economy, but I think the basic purpose of what President Trump tried, no more, anybody goes toward de-dollarization, I'm going to punish them and stuff like that, which you mentioned about BRICS. And so, I mean, he's just accelerated that whole process, because people are now no longer having that faith in the dollar. And you've seen the rate, the forward rate on the dollar, how the gold prices have gone up. So that de-dollarization process that he did not want to happen, he's actually pushed it much further. From last point, from India's point of view, I think basically we need to invest much more in R&D, as James clearly said. I mean, China is so far ahead. So how much can we really get the benefit of that China plus one? I mean, are we really there to capture that, the R&D, the infrastructure that we need, the skilling that we need? It's not just going to fall on our laps. As we've been talking about it for the last many years, even before this, there was this friendshoring, reshoring, this all being talked about for the last few years. But Vietnam benefited, Indonesia benefited, it went off elsewhere. So this time, I hope, let's see how things evolve. The government will be probably more serious, on the ball, and probably be better prepared. The last point, which I thought I should also bring out, is this broader economic warfare is going to have a spill-off effect onto the UN, G20. So it's going to make, global goals and the global commons and all that very much more complicated affair. And at this point of where we are in the climate change, global warming trajectory, not a good thing that's happened now, because then collaborating on those fronts is going to be put completely on the back burner. So that's my just initial remarks.
Very nice. Thank you, Rahulji, for taking you open up a lot of other issues as well, connected issues, and now the spectrum is wider. One is the technology point of view, another is the rules-based trading that you have talked about, the relevance or irrelevance of WTO, and then the whole gamut of trade blocks, bilateral agreements, and that kind of things. Now, one big question before all of us, perhaps, is will this entire thing be just limited to China and US, or is it going to have a broad spectrum of impact across the board for several countries, both developed and developing countries? Is the one big question perhaps we would like to put our thoughts on. And second question to my mind is, uh, will this policy of reciprocal tariffs and things like that, is it going to be sustainable for the Republican White House? Is something which perhaps you would like to comment upon. Katherine, you want to say something on that?
Which part is sustainable? There's, I think one of the reasons for the disorder and the chaos of this, which is almost as bad as this, is because the White House is getting feedback from both ordinary Americans and the donor class that what they're doing has harmful effects on the economy. So the signs are kind of everywhere. The stocks, which have had an amazing 3 days, positively, I think, because every time there's a rumor that we're going to work something out with China, things come back. I hate to say it, I think there may be a little bit of insider trading going on as well. But to the level of the increases we saw over the last 4 days, definitely people want things to improve. People want to make something positive out of this. But if you look at the Treasury bills sell-offs, that's been quite concerning. That capital is fleeing the United States, and China actually, owns a fair amount of U.S. Treasuries. Now, if they dump those, it would be bad for China. They'd have all these dollars, but they could simply not buy more, and other Asian economies could choose not to buy more. So it's quite precarious. And then, you have to remember one of the things that propelled President Trump into the White House was inflation, that Joe Biden had not managed inflation well. And now, if you do start to see real inflationary pressure, that's going to be very negative. And so I would say that they have to be aware that even on immigration today, their poll numbers are more than half of Americans polled, at least in one poll, disapproved even of immigration, which had been the strong suit. So what will all this mean? I mean, if I've been around Washington a fair amount, and my guess is, in answer to your question, there's no way they're going to get all these 74. I'm not even sure 74 countries really are on the table, but let's say there's no way, even with a country like India, Japan, Korea, they will have major detailed trade agreements done in 90 days. I mean, I think everyone knows that, but it could end up, in a positive place for everyone by having new trade arrangements, with the United States and India, with other countries. So my guess is, the way Washington operates, the way this administration, but really any administration, they'll want to score a win. So they'll talk about, in the case of India, some deals that India has agreed to, let's say nuclear power plants opening, which had been an issue when I was in India. I left in 2019. Perhaps I think an F-35 purchase is kind of a tall order, but more munitions, purchases, oil and gas. And then we're really going to get down to negotiate. And I think that's what's going to happen with a lot of countries. And I'll leave China and the United States off the table for now, because that's the one that I don't believe is going to go away in a hurry because of China as much as anything else. You're on mute, sir.
Okay. James, do you think that it will be just again, I'm repeating myself, will it be limited to China and US? Number one. Number two, in the last 2 days, you have seen that some amount of blinking happening from the White House, saying that maybe we will settle at a lower tariff rate with China, and some amount of such signaling has happened. What do you think will happen between China and US? Will there be a complete showdown? Will it be some meeting point somewhere? And or will it be an all-out kind of a situation, if I may be allowed to say though? So where is it heading for? Because this is going to determine as to how the entire other, little things will fall in place.
Right. Great question. I'm afraid I don't know where it's heading, and I don't think anybody knows. But at the moment, a couple of interesting things do seem to be emerging. Some of them, I'm no expert on India, but I do want to highlight, as I think you've already mentioned, Apple. The fact that um, um, Apple is redoubling efforts to invest more in India and to sell. The Financial Times had a scoop yesterday saying that
Yes.
Apple wants to make all of the iPhones that it sells in America in India, which strikes me as a fascinating and hugely significant move, because if Apple wants to do that, then surely there will be other tech companies that want to do similar things. I don't know whether India has the capacity to absorb all of this investment, but I certainly think this is going to become a big topic. So that's point number one. Point number two is Southeast Asia. I think Southeast Asia is kind of rather similar to India in the sense that it can be the China plus one, or the China alternative, put it that way. It can be a place that is close to the China supply chain, so we can get components from China, and where countries can manufacture things.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Excuse me, please. Ambassador Menon, will you put your system on, mute, please? Menon sir, you have to keep your. Thank you so much. Yeah, please go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to mention Southeast Asia. I also think that Southeast Asia is has in recent years, and I believe will increasingly in the future, be seen as a China alternative, and therefore we could see significant trade and investment flows into Southeast Asia. There is a certain amount of confusion right now as to US policies on manufacturing things, well, in Southeast Asia or anywhere that have China inputs. But and I that's quite a technical discussion. Maybe we don't have time for it today, but I just flagged that as a potential issue with my argument. But anyway, I do think Southeast Asia is important as well. Okay, so to try to just give a flavor of an answer to your question over what's going to happen between China and the US, I really think that China will not back down significantly to the US. And the reason for that, some people say, oh, well, the reason for that is that China wants to save face, etc. No, the reason for that is that China has already won the tech war. You cannot stress this enough. Chinese confidence is sky high because they look at the dashboard of all the crucial technologies, and with the exception of semiconductors and a couple of others, they are ahead. And that's why they will not back down. I think that, this could, I think we are in at least a decade, maybe 2 decades, maybe more, of US-China competition. All economic areas, in the geopolitical area, in every area we can think of, and in third countries all over the world. So that's where I think we are right now.
Thank you. Thank you, James, for that perspective. 2 points that you have made. One is about shifting investments to Southeast Asia as part of the recalibration or alternative that people are looking to for China. That is one. Second is does India have the capacities and capability to absorb new investments? If companies like Apple want to put their money and their facilities here, Rahul, what do you think will happen? Do you think India has the capacity and capability to absorb such investments? And secondly, do you think if India doesn't measure up to the expectation, do you think some people may move on to other Southeast Asian destinations and things like that? What do you think will happen?
Uh, as things stand today, we are obviously short of on those metrics. So
Okay.
Apple making that statement does not mean that they will be in a position to shift in the next 6 months or 1 year. I mean, and these supply chains don't move like that. So, and as we all know, the US is going to say, or whoever is going to negotiate it for rules of origin, it's not only a certain percentage of production there, it's the critical components of production, which will continue to come. Like in pharma, the APIs, China has a pretty stranglehold on the API supplies.
Yes.
So pharma is similarly here in electronic components manufacturing. I think they have really technology, expertise, skill, and so to develop that entire ecosystem is going to take a long, hard grind. And so it's just beginning now. If we begin, we can see this, a few years down the line, maybe it'll pay off. So that's the first point, that we'll have to start working on it and come up to speed to sort of try to be able to catch and attract this.
Second part to the question was which countries in Southeast Asia may be an alternative for China, like James was suggesting, that there could be alternatives in many of the Southeast Asian countries, maybe Philippines, maybe someone else.
Yeah,
Do
the
you
clear
think
front runner,
Vietnam?
which has been over the last few years, I think, has been Vietnam.
Vietnam.
Vietnam has benefited tremendously from that. And I was recently in Vietnam. I saw how the work ethic, the sort of infrastructure, the way the people, the culture. So there is, and they have a advantage of proximity and all that. So they have already sort of benefited from that and will continue to do so. And the other ones that now I think people are looking at more in terms of a larger population base is probably Indonesia. So with over 200 million people, they could come in. Philippines, of course, has the advantage of language. Again, they would come in to play in that respect. So these are the big players who will be also trying their best. So, so it's not that India is the only player in the game. So that's the other thing that I think we need to realize and understand. We not only need to step up to the game, we actually need to beat the other players to actually win the game. If you're going to get these, it's a serious game going on here. So Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, they're all pitching for the same Apple to move and other companies to move. So we need to actually demonstrate a clear edge. So it is, and it's not very clear when in the corporate boardrooms that that edge is available.
Can I add something here, actually, which is that
Yeah, please.
The other
Please.
part, the other part we can't lose sight of, which is going to be difficult, especially for Southeast Asia, and to some extent less for India, but I think also for India, which I can get into in a second, is that the administration has an unstated policy, it seems, of wanting countries to choose between the United States and China. And that's going to be extremely difficult. James alluded to he mentioned the content requirements, that's going to be an issue. But I think it's bigger than that. And so I don't know where that will end up, except also to create more difficulty and chaos. And certainly China is noticing this and probably will offer sweeteners of its own. When I say, in some, on the face of it, it will be easier for India. Yes, because India also wants to decouple from China, for obvious and longstanding reasons. But India also has a very long border with China, so it doesn't want, too much tension. And also, India values its strategic autonomy. I mean, I can't really speak. Ambassador Chhabra can speak to this point better than I can, but it has seemed to me, as a practitioner who lived in India and someone who looks at India closely now, that things like having to choose between membership in the BRICS and us. The BRICS are something that the Biden administration was remarkably tolerant on, even when the rhetoric was sort of heating up, I think because they felt it was an organization that wasn't going to do much. But if you look at things, even if you don't issue a common currency, which I think was always a bit optimistic, if you allow more and more trading in local currency, away from the dollar, is India going to want to give that up? Is India going to want to cede the spot of global South leader to China in that organization? So these are the kinds of complications that, just to build on what everyone is saying, I think we're going to see in the next couple of months and years, and it will make things, interesting and at times precarious, including for India.
Yeah, two things that come to my mind, moving away from Southeast Asia and China. Will there be resetting of relations between US and European Union? Because two big areas where the American trade deficit is, one is European Union and another is China, which together may constitute about $500 billion in a year. So, James, do you think that there will be resetting of relation, either it is geopolitical or trade and investment relations between Europe and US? Do you think that Europe has the wherewithals to, say that, challenge US and say, hey, hello, listen, we are here. We are here to, challenge you. That kind of a thing. What do you think? Just give your
Yeah,
thoughts.
you're asking all the difficult questions today. Look, okay. I obviously I don't know, but my feeling is that this trade war is all about China. Fundamentally, it's all about China. Everybody else is a bit player, including the EU. Of course, the US does not like the fact it has a huge deficit with the EU. And it is also true that the EU is a highly protectionist power. We shouldn't forget that. The EU is not a free trader. We have been, well, I mean, I'm in the UK now, we're not in the EU anymore. But we in the EU have been living off the fat of protectionism for at least 20 years. So the US has a strong argument here. It is true that the EU is a highly protectionist bloc. So I think there are two things going on. One is this trade war is primarily about China. Two is that the US has secondary concerns, and I think EU falls into that. So if you ask me to predict, I would say that the EU will have to move. We will have to become less protectionist in order to appease the Trump White House. And personally, I don't think that's a bad thing. I'm pro-free trade. And I think that EU trade barriers have been very damaging to the EU, as well as to global trade. And you're going to say, well, why has it been damaging? It's been damaging because if you protect industries, they get lazy. And the biggest problem that the EU has in terms of its industry, particularly tech industry, is that we become too lazy. We don't have hardly any world-leading technology companies in the EU, with aside from a few like ASML in the Netherlands. And this is because we haven't had to strive to get ahead in the last 20, 30 years. So that's my feeling.
Okay. One question, last question before I open the floor for discussion amongst all our participants. They have been eagerly waiting to ask questions among the panel members. Is that Rahulji, do you think that one, will Europe go less protectionist? Number one. Number two, do you think anyway World Trade Organization has been very, very irrelevant till now? So is it means that we close down the WTO in Geneva and move ahead? Anyway, there have been bilateral and regional pacts going on. So do we close down the WTO and go ahead with maybe regional pacts or bilateral or something like that? What is it that's going to happen?
Yeah, as James mentioned, I think Europe will become less protectionist to meet the requirements of the day. And the same for India also. I mean, I think Indian industry has been protected, and lowering the tariff barriers is not only good for just for free trade and moving, it's also good for domestic industry to sort of be able to fight at a global level. And that's when you get the products, the quality moving up. So I think Europe will come down. But the other aspect is, of course, that when you talked about Europe sort of standing up, remember Germany and has already announced, the defense expenditure is going to shoot up, and things are beginning to move on that front also. So we shouldn't lose sight of that. Mr. Trump, with his tariff wars, has really unleashed a lot of other, factors into play. So that, and then the last part that you mentioned, you were asking about, sorry,
WTO.
about
WTO.
WTO. Yeah. So while today, I mean, it seems that you can't say it's completely irrelevant or it's not in play. Of course, you will have different aspects of it. Their appeal mechanism was not working. Now, of course, the multilateral order seems to be collapsing. But it has a role to play, and there is some sort of it is sort of some normative rule setting sort of institution that exists. So if you just, I mean, large parts of the world may still be sort of be willing to go along with that. So you don't know how it's going to evolve, and there's a lot of information, expertise available with them, or data analysis. They have it. So all that you can't just dismiss it, and can't put a doge onto it. So let's just keep it for some time and see what happens.
So what do you think? That means we are going to turn WTO into another some kind of a think tank and not much into policy related issues and that kind of a stuff?
We will see how this goes and how long, where the backlash comes and how things evolve. So in trade matters, it is a world trade organization. So trade may be evolving in a certain manner, but WTO itself may evolve. It doesn't have to then exactly have this multilateral trading arrangement. We can be talking about regional trading blocks, and it can be dealing with different issues. It doesn't necessarily have to fit in with that.
Okay. If you all permit the panel members, would you like to take some few questions from the participants, please?
Yeah, sure.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Do I open? Okay. Goodlin, you have already some questions, or do I open it up to the floor for people to pose questions, please?
So we've asked the participants to put down their questions in the chat box in case anybody wants to raise their hand and be available on the video. That is all right for us. So we'll give them a minute.
You can just open if someone wants to just pick up their mic and speak. Let them speak. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Hello,
Abhishek.
everybody. Hi, my name is Abhishek. So I'm the founder of Project Statecraft, and thank you so much for joining this panel. I think it was very, very informative and very knowledgeable as well. And I had a couple of questions. So the first question was basically surrounding Europe. I think there was a lot of discussion around competition as well as the aspects of fuel prices and competitiveness that arises from the fuel costs in Europe. So, following the invasion of Ukraine, there was a change in the way Europe was procuring its energy because it wasn't directly buying from Russia, but there was a surge in the energy that it was procuring from India, which was Russian oil refined in Indian refineries, if I'm not wrong. And now there is a larger push from the United States that one of the ways to address that trade deficit between between United States and Europe is by Europe buying more oil from the United States, in line with President Trump's campaign slogan, "Drill, baby, drill." So I'm just wondering how this could change the geopolitics of oil, geopolitics of energy around the world, and what kind of repercussion should we expect in India basis this?
Katherine, would you like to pitch in with
Oh,
oil politics?
I can answer. Actually, here's a fun fact. I was the American official who welcomed the first shipment of American petroleum to India in Orisha when I was Consul General. There's no doubt that the United States would like India to buy more oil and gas from us. In terms of geopolitics, I don't think I'm enough of an expert on how international oil and gas markets move. I would just say that what will be interesting is I take Ambassador Chhabra's point from the very beginning about how climate change is off the table, and I share with him the regret for that. I do think that in Trump 1, renewable energy was not completely off the table because and so to the extent that it involves U.S. sales, particularly for things like nuclear power, but other parts of power, I think we shouldn't assume that means it's completely off the table. I was thinking a lot when James was talking about how Chinese were ahead in technology and that Europe had gotten complacent, that I had read in his former paper an article about how Germans were now in the EV industry, were now looking to Chinese technology because it was so much more advanced than what Europe had done. But maybe this will provide the boost, as he says, to look at all technologies surrounding energy. Because for a country like India, which has pledged to transition to renewables, it's going to be tough to do it without increasing, fossil fuels in the short run. So, but in the long run, I do believe India aims to get to that goal. And I would think the United States would want to be part of that market if, and that would be part of the trade discussions. But we'll see.
Rahulji, do you think what will be the impact of the change scenario in the oil scenario, oil politics across West and the Gulf region, that is West Asia? Will it have an impact on India, please?
Yeah, of course, there will be an impact. And of course, most of the oil, the way the oil market works, most of the oil contracts are actually done on a long-term basis. They're all, 20, 30-year, multi-decadal contracts. So what we are talking about is really the spot market and a small percentage which is moving here and there. So if any such changes have to take place, they will take place, and we will try and adjust it. The US will want some sort of to show something, as Katherine initially said, you have to show a win. So, so you move that, and then the oil, it finds its own sort of sweet spot. The market will adjust, and we'll have to search for new markets. Europe will have to buy more from them rather than from us. So all this sort of play goes on all the time. So it's nothing new. It's happening all the time.
I just wanted to sorry, that Vice President Vance in his speech in India also stressed that, U.S. industry would like to help India with its own, gas exploration. So I think that's another avenue of cooperation.
That's true. Srishti More has raised her hand. Srishti, what's your question, please? You want to show up yourself?
Yeah. Hello.
Yes.
Hello. My name is Srishti Moore. So I currently, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So
Yeah.
I currently work for a think tank that is based in Brussels, where I did from masters from regarding EU-China diplomacy. So I think this was a very, very good panel discussion to, engage myself in. So my question is for both Ambassador Chhabra and James. First of all, James, many congratulations on your audio. I just got it and I'm waiting to listen to it. I think it's very relevant to my work that I'm doing, and it seems very, very relevant to today's discussion. I haven't listened to it but from what I have read, all the summary from, it seems to be dealing with how innovation is being weaponized. So my question to you is, do you think that the weaponization of tariff was just a preview of how the weaponization of R&D, patent, and the tech alliances is going to happen? And my question to Dr. Ambassador Chhabra, uh, oh, yeah. So I had, based on the discussion that you just did around, do you think that India's leadership in digital public infrastructure and EU's regulatory strength, do you think there's a scope for new India-EU digital trade access, which can be an alternative to both America's tech dominance and China's digital authoritarianism? That was my question.
James? Yeah.
Okay.
James, would you start with?
Yep, sure. Okay, so the question was weaponization of R&D and patents and all of those things. It's hard to see how those, well, okay, let's take those separately. Patents, it's hard to see how you weaponize that because basically the patents is, whether or not to grant a patent is decided by the UN Patent Office or the European Patent Office or the US Patent Office. There are different procedures. It's kind of a technical issue on whether or not to grant a patent. R&D, I would say, yeah, I mean, in a way, but I think really what we're facing now is going to be a realignment of the West in order to meet the China challenge in technology. I think that the US cannot accept China's technological lead. I mean, it has to accept it to a certain degree, but it really wants to, shore up its own capabilities. And I believe that Europe will too, mainly for the reason that many Chinese technologies are networked. In other words, they all have data. And I think that to Europeans and Americans, it is just not acceptable for a Chinese device to be harvesting our data, because we all know that whatever Chinese company is getting your data, it's going to be available to the Chinese Communist Party at some point. That is an issue for individuals, and it's more importantly an issue for national security. So I think that what we're going to see now, a big part of the response in Europe and the US is going to be industrial policy to build up technological capacities where we can. And in this regard, just one final point, I think the advent of AI and automation is going to help the US and Europe, because if we live in a world in which you're going to build a factory, it's almost all automated, it's almost all robotized, then it's much easier to build that factory. You just buy the robots and you import the products and you put it together and then you're manufacturing. You don't have to deal with the very complicated labor issues, which is one of the biggest obstacles that we have, certainly here in Europe, towards manufacturing. So sorry, the reply is rather all over the place, but it's a tough question to answer. We could talk for a long time.
Shrishi, if I understood your question to me, it was whether there will be sort of three alternative models: the China model of authoritarian, the way the digital public infrastructure, the India, Europe, and then the US one.
Yeah.
I think that's what you were saying. Yeah. Whether India and Europe have that. I don't think there is really space for a third model if you're going to try and we'll have to align ourselves with, sort of the Western model or the free world model, the more, open source model where, so and our digital public infrastructure is like that, and Europe is broadly there. So I think the distinction between the European and the US may be a bit too fine. I don't think it's so distinct, unlike maybe moving completely to the China model of how they are doing their stuff. Which, as James is also saying, not only in terms of technology, I don't know, you're probably aware since you've done a little bit of Chinese studies and all that, but their Weibo and all that is pretty advanced. I mean, many of us in the rest of the world aren't even aware of, the sort of their equivalent of the Facebook and the WhatsApp and all. I mean, it's really pretty advanced where they've reached in that level. I just thought I'll bring that to.
Thank you, Rahul. I think Medha Gupta had some question for Katherine. Medha Gupta, you had a question for Katherine. Did you send something on the message box?
I could read out the question if that's useful.
Abhishek,
Yeah.
Please do that.
Yeah.
Please do that.
So this is a question by Medha on since the US has only made capable partners throughout, how committed is the US to liberal democratic values in terms of trade and economy? And the second question is to all the panelists that if the tariffs are a good thing in the 21st century.
Yes, Katherine, please.
Ma'am, you're on mute.
Yeah, no, there was a leaf blower outside, so I wanted to mute myself. The first question is for me, so I will answer that one. I would say that the United States, in terms of trade, has always most valued democratic partners, but that's not to say that has only valued democratic partners. And that's always been true throughout whatever administration we've had. I think the stress has been there on rules-based trading. So, for example, we were talking about patent processes, or patents, as we would say. I think one of the complaints, for example, when I was in Rome working with the European Union, we had big concerns about China's abuse of intellectual property, and to put it mildly, that they were spying on, American and Western companies to steal technology, which is, I would argue, one of the ways they're ahead now. So that's a concern, rules-based. But we never voted to not. In fact, we led negotiations to bring China into the WTO. So I think there's always been two tracks of values. I think, do we promote our values generally? I can't speak for all Americans in this. I can only tell you that the administration we're seeing really has more of a transactional approach and not a values-based approach. Then again, I think values can be sort of a mutable term. So, we definitely do talk about India, being the world's largest democracy, and we're the oldest democracy. I mean, I think that still is true. And there's much about the relationship with India that's valued, including with this administration. So there are common values seen, but there's also, approaches to Putin, and so it's kind of a mixed picture in my mind. I hope that's helpful, but it's also kind of a complicated. Good question. Thank you.
So you're on mute.
Second question, Abhishek, would you like to repeat?
Yes, so the second question was open to all the panelists. If tariffs are good in the 21st century.
What do you all think? James?
I mean, I suppose my feeling is that the central issue that America has is justified. The world has been free riding off American trade and investment for a long time. But, it's a big topic, but this has been part of the deal. This has been America's world. We've lived in it. We've all benefited, but so has America, right? And now the States is fundamentally reassessing that. So I mean, in a perfect world, we'd have free trade, but we'd also as Katherine says, we'd also have intellectual property, which China has done on a massive scale over the last 40 years. So, you know, these are all big trade-offs. It's hard to answer about tariffs in isolation. In a perfect world, we'd have no tariffs, but we'd also have fairness. But we don't have fairness. People are never going to be fair, right? They're always going to need external. I fear one of the things I fear is just being created by the US and which has been so effective. I mean, not perfect, but really so effective, is now breaking down. So we're going to end up with a less fair world. That's what I'm really worried about.
Okay. Rahul, do you think you agree with at this point of view, the 20%, where is it going to settle down? What will happen on the
Yeah,
tariffs issue
yeah. Obviously,
and
it's
how
not
it will
a.
play out?
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, being an economist, and I don't think tariffs per se is a good thing. Definitely not in the 21st century. There is an infant industry argument and all that up to a point. Beyond that, it's not a good thing. But just to James's point about the point that even Catherine made initially, that yes, the rest of the world has sort of benefited a lot from the United States open market and stuff like that. Don't forget, I don't think the United States was giving the world a free ride. They were getting geopolitical advantages on every dollar that they got in. So we should never forget that. I mean, all of us who worked in the State Department and foreign offices know how to turn the screws and what's happening and what to say when. So we have all taken benefit of these sort of figures, and we know, yeah. So this doesn't come free. Nothing comes free. There's no free lunch, so that I can assure you. So whatever figures that even poor those countries which were, Cambodia, that was sending some jeans, Levi's jeans, and is now being levied a tariff. Well, the United States did have a big say. They were able to sort of ask Cambodia for their pound of flesh whenever they required and whatever they wanted. So there is that geopolitical importance of it. So it doesn't come for free, and if you withdraw it, you can't play that card anymore. That's the whole thing. That I mean, it's transactional, meaning these are long-term relationships built over so long, and maybe it's not exactly, yeah, but if you want to do a transaction, I give you $10, I get this. Yeah, that's not how it was. Whereas that's how now it's becoming, which may not be such a good idea, because relationship between countries are, a different sort of ball game. You can't do this sort of stuff that, oh, by the way, I'm giving you this and you're getting this in exchange. That's not how it works.
Can I just add, it's also, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Before you come in, Catherine, do you mean to say that, Rahul, that every dollar that US spent got some $10 or $20 advantage or something like that?
No, not $10, $20. There's no way to quantify this. But the fact that the goods were coming in from whichever country they were coming in, and there was a trade deficit, did not mean that America was, they were taking it in because could afford to take it in. They knew they were taking it in, and the other country knew that America was being, okay, kind and generous. But tomorrow, when State Department secretary calls up, or the Commerce Secretary calls up his counterpart and says, look, hang on, this is how you will vote in the United Nations, or this is what you will do. There's certain trade-offs. Then he can't then that say, no, sir, I can't do this for you. It's obvious, because then he's going to pull the plug. So these things happen. I mean, and he doesn't have to remind anyone. All of us know this.
Would you agree that there was...
As a diplomat, maybe I wasn't skilled enough, but I have to tell you.
Before you come into that, do you
agree
that there were trade-offs?
I would think if we didn't quite have that power, certainly with India, we still don't have that power. I think, though, and with all seriousness, we have benefited, and I regret the loss of Pax Americana if that's what's going to happen. But I will, also say, from the point of view of Americans, we have sacrificed some as part of the deal, in our policy. It may not seem that way to you at the time, but I think, you know, there would be extra use for military money that we spend in some parts, that we have spent in some parts of the world. There was a marked effort to bring Japan, for example, back after World War II by letting them into the WTO, and we certainly paid for that in the 70s and 80s. So it's not maybe as cut and dry from a position of an American as maybe it appears sometimes. But boy, I really wish I were a good enough diplomat to make Cambodia do whatever we wanted to do.
Since you mentioned
If you all
Japan,
allow, can I take one more question, please?
Sorry.
One or two more questions are there. How long will you all want to be here? Another 10 minutes? Please, 10 minutes, okay, please?
That's really a hard stop at that time because I really have to go rush off to another event. But yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Somebody else wanted to ask a question. Goodly, or somebody else has typed something on the chat box. Abhishek, would you like to read out?
Yes, I can. So this is a question by Pavel Kashyap. And this first question is for Ms. Hadda. From the perspective of US trade diplomacy, how can future policy frameworks move beyond tariff-based strategies to foster more stable, inclusive trade relations with key partners like India and the wider Indo-Pacific? And the second question is for Ambassador Chhabra. In light of protectionist policies like tariffs, how is India positioning itself within multilateral trade platforms to enhance strategic autonomy while deepening economic cooperation with trusted partners like the US and others in the global south?
You want to start, President?
Well, yeah, I think there's a recognition, as we've alluded to throughout the panel, that tariffs are one measure of trade barriers, but there are other non-tariff barriers. You can have standards, you can have different mechanisms to try and keep competition out. So I think if these trade agreements, I doubt somehow they're going to be full trade agreements by the definition that we've traditionally used for trade agreements, simply because there's no congressional authority for passing these now, because speed seems to be of the essence. But my guess is that these will not only be tariff-based agreements that we'll start seeing coming from the White House. So for the example of India, there will be probably something about energy cooperation, AI cooperation. We already have a program that builds on a Biden era program called ISIT, called Trust, that's designed to foster collaboration between our industries. So I think we will move beyond tariffs only in these agreements, certainly.
Okay. Rahul?
In terms of course, our relationship with the Global South, I mean, we'll continue with the they're all pretty finely negotiated agreements that we have with them. So I don't know whether they will really get upset with this in this scenario. So they'll probably continue. But with the United States, as you said, as our trusted partner, I mean, we are one of the first off the block, luckily. So our team is, as we speak, negotiating the agreement there. And as Katherine very rightly said, I don't think there'll be a full agreement so quickly. It's difficult to get that. But there will be some certain broad principles, some broad categories which will probably be sorted out. And also because if we are going to get into a full negotiation of agreement, ours will be a lot about in terms of movement of personnel, because that is now our new, not really new, but it's been for the last few years, a strength. So it's not only goods, it's services and people. So, in what they call mode 4 movement and all that. So there's a movement of people that needs to be also factored in for a proper agreement. Yeah.
No, but I think the emphasis in the question, perhaps, as I understood, was will India continue to be able to maintain that strategic autonomy part of it? Because China has actually offered a hand of friendship, and on the other side is US, and still will you be able to balance it out and still have that space for strategic autonomy or not?
Yes,
That's
definitely
what I
we
think
will be.
is.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, because I couldn't see the question. Okay. So yeah, definitely we'll be able to balance it out. I mean, we'll have to balance it out. In the end, it's all a balancing game. I mean, that's what diplomacy is all about and negotiations. So there's a bit of give and take. Nobody's going to push the other one to the wall because, then you end up in a pretty, yeah. So there will be, each side will compromise to the maximum, and hopefully both sides come out with a win-win where they can both say that they've got something out of that agreement. So we will need to. I mean, we can't shy away from the fact that China is on our borders, one of the largest trading partner, maybe when you compare. And of course, the United States is, a very trusted partner there. So we'll have to sort of deal with both sides.
Okay. Having heard all of you, I think there's not much more space or time for more questions. Would like to make some short closing remarks. Start with Katherine.
Just to thank you for a really engaging discussion. And if anyone has an additional question for me, just pass it along via email and I'll do my best to answer. But thank you very much.
Okay. And James, would you like to add something?
Just to say thank you again, and also to say my main reflection is that this is going to be the era for diplomats. As the ambassador just said, we're going to need or you guys anyway, particularly India, is going to need very skillful diplomacy to make this balance.
Okay. Rahul, you would like to add something?
Just thank you. I mean, I was really fascinating discussion. I'm so glad you included me on the panel. It was a pleasure being here.
Thank you all. And we are going through exciting times. Mostly it is uncertain times. And we hope that we'll all get out with flying colors. And hope everybody will be happy thereafter, if at all. And thank you all for joining us. It was great pleasure hosting all of you. If someone else from the organizer wants to say something.
Yes, so very quickly, we want to pass it on to our member Srijanya, who will just deliver a very quick vote of thanks to all the panelists and everybody else for joining.
Thank you, sir, for giving me the floor. On behalf of the organizing team, it is both a pleasure and a privilege to extend the vote of thanks for today's event. First and foremost, our deepest gratitude goes to our esteemed speakers, Ms. Katherine B. Hadda, Mr. James Kynge, and Ambassador Rahul Chhabra, for generously taking time from their demanding schedules to be with us. Their valuable insights and thoughtful perspectives have immensely enriched today's discussion. We are also incredibly thankful to Mr. K.A. Badarinath for moderating the session with such poise and clarity, ensuring such a smooth and engaging dialogue throughout. To all the participants who raised compelling and innovative questions, thank you for driving the conversation forward and adding to the intellectual vibrance of the panel. This event stands as a testament to the collective efforts of so many. We are sincerely grateful to the division heads, core members, and founding teams of the Indian Foreign Policy Project and Project Statecraft for their constant support and commitment. A special mention goes to Mr. B.R. Neeraj, Gurleen Kaur, Abhishek Sutke, Medhi Gupta, and Ajitesh Vishwanath. Your dedication behind the scenes did not go unnoticed and is deeply appreciated. And lastly, a heartfelt thank you to our audience. Your energy, involvement, and presence truly brought this event to life. It's your engagement that adds purpose to such initiatives and motivates us to continue creating meaningful experiences. As we wrap up, let's carry with us the spirit of dialogue, diplomacy, and collaboration that form the heart of today's event. May this be just one of many steps that we take together towards a deeper engagement with international affairs. Thank you once again, and we hope to see you at our upcoming events.